What happens when you die? I think this is a question that plagues many people, especially when looking at the face of death, or throughout their lives, fearing even the notion of death, based on the stories that we've been told about what death is. And as someone who has died and gone to where you go when you die, I feel inclined to tell people my experience, if not to just ease your worried heart and let you know that there's nothing to be afraid of. In fact, it is the greatest experience of all time. But first, I'd like to share some of my death experiences. My first one was whitewater rafting, the first available day of the season near Jackson Hole, and we flipped, and I was pinned under the raft, flailing my body, looking up at the light, and I just remember it going dark. And the next thing I knew, I was coughing up water on top of the raft. And then the next one was being on the back of a snowmobile of a drunk driver. And we went over a cliff and we smashed into a tree, and I went flying through the branches and landed probably 30 feet away. Again, blackout. And I woke up to people screaming at me, seeing if I was alive. And then when I started driving, one of the worst blizzards of my life was going on, and I was late to school. And I couldn't be late to school again. So I was going faster than I should have been going, and a car wouldn't get out of the middle of the road, and I had to kind of maneuver around it. The tire hit the side of the bank, and the Jeep that I was driving flipped front over back into the air. Another slow motion experience, and then boom, 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 boom. And then it rolled 4 or 5 times right before hitting a tree. And the Jeep was completely trashed, but I was wearing a seatbelt, and the row bar saved my neck literally. And that day I went to school and was picking glass out of my head like nothing had happened. Then another experience was being at my cabin, and we were tubing behind a boat, getting very wild with it. And the next thing I knew, I was being thrust very high velocity into a pontoon boat that was tied to a dock. And split second before impact, something took over my body, and I rolled into the water right before the tube hit and went off. And through the weeds and the muckiness of it, it kind of provided like a cushion and saved me. And I got up underneath the pontoon that should have paralyzed me. When I was in Chicago, I was driving my bike through a dark, shady area trying to quickly get home, and a car side blinded me and bruised this whole side of my body, and I fell on this hand and sprained all my fingers. And in a rush of shock and adrenaline and fear, I got up and started going as quickly as possible. And the moment I realized my brakes didn't work was when I hit, in the dark, another piece of jutted alley that had come up. That was even, and I flew over the handlebars. And that was the moment I felt that someone above me was looking down at my avatar, being like, she's not listening to me. Like my operator was just like, my avatar's not listening to me. She needs to wake up. And I did wake up. And I woke up to spitting out my teeth, a broken jaw on both sides, and my tongue bitten through, and a lot of blood coming out. And strangely enough, I had dreams for months of my teeth crumbling and spitting them out. And after that incident, I never had it again. But what happened on that time was I woke up and I realized that I was living this superficial life that wasn't even aligned with who I was. It wasn't even me. I didn't even care. My relationships, my life, it just was so egotistical, so superficial, and it had no meaning and no fulfillment. And from that point on, my life changed. And people would say that I changed, and I changed a lot because I woke up to many things. And that was my great awakening, and that's another story. But what happened when I went all the way to where you go when you die is like your energy and your soul is lifting out of this physical reality. Everything is becoming more elusive, transparent, holographic. And I'm rising above the flora and the fauna and the particles of physical existence, up and up into the big black abyss of the universe, beyond time and space. It was the wildest feeling to be beyond time and space. And it felt like I was in a womb of creation. Like the stars that you look up at night, I was there. That's where I was. That's where you go. And I was greeted by a voice, an ominous voice of the bearer of that womb that sounded a lot like a mother. It was the voice of God, or one of the voices. And I look around and I find my spirit family. And we were all just light. We were just light beings. That's all I was light. I was just energy. And so were these other beings that felt like family. And what it felt like was coming home. What it felt like was unconditional love, so powerful in a way that I had never felt before, but always knew I was. And in meeting them, it was just such a joyous occasion where we're just frolicking and twisting and experiencing each other's energy, and it felt so good and so joyful and giggly and orgasmic. It felt orgasmic. It felt so good. And each of the energies had their own signature. One was like orange and kind of square particles and geometric shapes. And another one was like blue and green and bubbly like the ocean water. And mine was like white iridescent and indigo blue. It was really beautiful. It was the happiest, most blissful experience ever. And then it's like she wanted to introduce me to my divine counterpart. That was a mirror signature of mine. And the meeting of that was unbelievable bliss. It felt like completion. That's what it felt like. Completion. And we spun and danced and twirled around the universe, and it was just the most blissful coming home completion I had ever felt. And how we communicated, since we don't have bodies and lips, was through knowing. Knowing. We communicated through knowing. And if you think about it, if we're just all unconditional love, then there's not too much to think about. It's pretty simple. You're just knowing. You just are consciousness, pure consciousness. So what you are and what happens when you die is you are literally light, life force, source, creator, energy, and light. And what it feels like is unconditional, infinite love and bliss. And all you are is your knowing, your consciousness. And that is the part of you that is eternal. And it is the eternal part of all of creation and God, or whatever you want to call it. That is what heaven or the afterlife or whatever you want to call it is. I call it the place you go when you die, or the experience you have. So that part of us never dies, that soul essence, life force part of us. And when we're the most aligned with that life force energy that gives us life to be able to speak to each other and communicate and feel and experience each other, that is love. When we're most in alignment with that, we feel love. And that is where our knowing comes from. That's what happens when we're most in alignment with who we are. We don't have to wait to die to feel that. It is possible to feel that in this lifetime. But if I can tell you, you don't have anything to be afraid of. Only suffering ends. Only this 3D physical reality and all the worries and all the experiences that came with it vanish. But you and your soul are eternal. And you return to the state of eternity. What happens from there? I don't know. But that's my experience. And that is why I am not afraid to die. In fact, I'm looking forward to it. But it gave me a new sense of, okay, I can take more risks now. I can live more fully now because I am not afraid to die. And I hope from me sharing that story that you get a sense of that too. I love you so much. Yay! We're all gonna die and it's gonna be great. But in the meantime, let's live life and have a little more fun if we can, yeah? And learn from our experiences because they expand our consciousness. And that's what life in this 3D physical reality is all about. Because heaven and hell is not a place you go when you die. It's a place, it's a feeling inside of you.